For every Jew. Okay, we are holding in a Farbrengen from Tafshin Mem Zayin to 5747 1987. It was a Farbrengen that came out the same kvias like yesterday on Shabbos Parshas Hachodesh, Mevorchem Hachodesh Nissen, Vayakhel-Pekudei, and we will start from Ois Dalid. Ois Dalid is about the third paragraph on the page. Al Pia Amar Le'il, according to what we spoke about, the Rebbe spoke about earlier in the Farbrengen, Shachidush the Parshas Hachodesh B'Shana Zud, and uniqueness of Parshas Hachodesh this year, Misbate Bad Goshes in Yonush Rosh Chodesh Nissen, expressed itself in emphasizing the idea of Rosh Chodesh Nissen. Heimetzad Parshas Shvuah v'Heimetzad Birchas HaChodesh. Both, if you look at the Parsha of the week and you look at the fact that we are benching Rosh Chodesh Nissen on the Shabbos. Because in the Parsha, if you noticed, it mentions towards the end, yesterday in Vayakhel-Pekudei, it mentions, I believe, twice the date of Moshe when he was supposed to erect the Mishkan for going into operation, which is in the first day of the month of Nisan, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Yes, Lis Akev al Bir Teuchno Milas Rosh Chodesh Nisan. We have to take some time to explain the content and the advantage quality of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, Koilol B'Miyuchad, including and specifically Halimud Vayirab and the Geulah Ma'asav Apoyol, the lesson, the directive concerning action, doing action, because action is primary. The idea behind this is the primary idea of the month of Nisan is Inyan HaGeulah, the idea of redemption. Chazal say, when Hashem chose His world, in other words, when He created the world initially, He established heads of months and years, and that was all, both the heads of months and the years was all in the month of Tishrei. When Hashem chose Yaakov and his children, He established in it a head of month of redemption. Because it says, so it became a head of months for the idea of redemption. In that month, in the past, the Yidden were redeemed from Mitzrayim, and in that month they will be redeemed in the future. As it says, like on the days you're going out of the land of Mitzrayim, I will show you wonders when Moshiach comes. And the Medrash applies it not just like that the miracles will be similar, but it will be the same days. In other words, it will be in the month of Nisan, just like it was in the month of Nisan then. This, by the way, follows. The Rebbe says that even though there's a machlokes between a dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, when will the future redemption take place? Rabbi Eliezer holds that the future redemption will take place in the month of Tishrei, and Rabbi Yeshua holds that Moshiach will come in the month of Nisan. Still, in all, we find a lot of times in Chazal and Gemara and Mishnayos, we'll find that even though that in one place there's a dispute about something, in other places it's just like accepted the one opinion, and that's how we know that we follow that opinion. In a similar vein, the Rebbe says that even though in one place there's brought down a dispute about this between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, but in other Mamorei Chazal, he just says, without any discussion, that they came out in this and they will go out in this. And this is one of the examples where the Chazal just say it without saying, oh, but there's a dissenting opinion, there's someone else that says differently, etc. Anyway, let's continue. So the Rebbe says, this was again, it was said on Shabbos Mevorchem Chodesh Nisan. Standing in the Shabbos, we're benching the head of month of Nisan. That from Shabbos Mevorchem Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So the Rebbe said earlier in this Farbrengen, what does it mean Mevorchem? it's a bracha. In other words, all the bracha for the month of Nisan, all the blessings, all the amshachs for the month of Nisan start on Shabbos Mevorchim. Tzrich aliyah hadgasha miyuchedes with shtura miyuched. There has to be a special emphasis and a special tumult, a special storm. Benegel the inyan hagula concerning the redemption. Ben Nisan asidin ligal, that when Moshiach comes, we will come in Nisan, we will be redeemed in Nisan. But Pratis Yosef, the Rebbe says more specifically, Hashturim al dvar hageulahu, the tumult about the Geulah is Heim benegel lekach shebevade higia kvar zman hageulah. Both concerning the topic that surely the time of the redemption has arrived already. Veheim benegel lekach shageulah tzricha is bepoil Parshas mamish, and also concerning the fact that the Geulah has to be in actuality and literally in the simple sense. Asher beis in yonim elum mudgoshim gam begulam Mitzrayim. Both of these details, that the time of the Geulah has come and that it has to come down in actual real world situation, is emphasized in the Geulah that the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim. Val derech zeh benegel Geulah asidik will come on in a similar vein concerning the future redemption, as the Rebbe will point out further in this sikha. Benegel is man hageulah concerning the time of the redemption. Is man hageulah concerning the time of the redemption. Amr Chazal said, Kivin sheyagia ketz, once the appointed time for the Jewish people to leave Mitzrayim arrived, lo ikvan hamakim keheref ein. Hashem did not delay them even the amount of time that takes to blink an eye, even an eye blink worth of time. Immediately, the very moment that their time was up, they were out. So the question is, what's the big deal? Yeah, it came the time for them to leave, so they left. Why wouldn't they leave? So the Rebbe explains it according to an explanation that the Frierdiker Rebbe gives on what we say in the Haggadah every year. The uniqueness of this, the novelty of this Maimer Chazal is Al Pi Bir, more according to what my father-in-law, the Frierdiker Rebbe, explains, but Pirish Maimer Haggadah, in the explanation of what the Haggadah states, Baruch Hu, blessed be He, Shachodesh Baruch Hu Chishev V'Saketz Lasis, that Hashem calculated the end of times to do it. In other words, Hashem took them out in time. What's the quality and the praise that Hashem fulfilled His promise? Like it says, Baruch Shomer Avtachos Yisrael, blessed be He that He kept His promise to the Yidden, Ligolis Yisrael, to redeem the Yidden. So the Frierdiker Rebbe explains, Vabir, the explanation behind it is, that Hashem desired to have a home down here below. And how does that home come about? Like we've been learning recently in Tanya, through the avodah of refining the sparks, elevating the sparks of those down here below. That Hashem Kaviyachol has great delight and enjoyment and pleasure in this service that Yidden do. So heaven forbid, this could be Hashem's delight of elevating the sparks could be without an end, without a boundary. And it could just go on. That is the praises and the thanks, etc. Baruch Hu Shakadosh Baruch Hu Chishev V'Saketz Lasis, that Hashem calculated the end to do it. In other words, He made a calculation and said, that's it. At this and this time, it's over. There'll be an end and a set boundary to the service of the refining the sparks. That's in the manner of a war that takes place in exile and during enslavement. The Rebbe is now going to explain a very interesting point about it, about how could it be a possibility, how would we think it would actually could have turned out otherwise. So the Rebbe says in the second paragraph, Protis Yoiser, more specifically, Isa Bekisve Arizal. It's brought down in the writings of the Arizal, who really is the one that put forth the idea of Berurim and the Avoyas HaBerurim, etc., etc. He was the one that really introduced Yidden to this topic. Shebegolus Mitzrayim Biruru Yisrael Reish Beis Nitzutzim Mirapach HaNitzutzim Shenoflu B'Shviras HaKelim. In the Golus of Mitzrayim, the Jewish people refined, elevated 202 sparks from the 288 sparks that fell during the breaking of the vessels, which is the reason why there are sparks down here. Initially, because there was the breaking of the vessels in the world of Toyu, as Chassidus quotes the Arizal. Where do we know the number of 202 specifically? The Arizal establishes that there's 288 sparks. But how do we know that in Mitzrayim 202 were elevated of the 288? Shizel Masha Kosov, this is what it says in the Pasuk, V'gam Erev Rav Ole Itom. Also, a mixed multitude went up with them. If you could tell by the print over here, the word Rav is in bold. Rav stands for Reish Beis Nitzutzim. So it was a mixture of the 202 sparks went up with them from Mitzrayim. All that was left since we went out of Mitzrayim till Moshiach comes is to refine only 86 out of the 288 sparks, 202. Subtract that away from 288, you have 86. B'gematria Elokim, that's the numerical equivalent of Shem Elokim. So now the Rebbe says a fascinating thing. There could have been more than the 202 taken out of Mitzrayim. The interesting point is that we just think usually that in Mitzrayim was only 202 sparks, and that's all they could have taken out. The Rebbe is going to say an interesting point. Here, listen to this. The avoid of refining the sparks that fell down through the breaking of the vessels of the world of Toyu is tachlis and mataras bria seder ishtalshlos toil matikum. It is not just some type of side benefit or gain or some other type of thing that comes about. It's the purpose. It's the entire reason why the Seder Ishtalshlos, the chain order descent of the world that's repaired, was brought into being. To elevate all those 288 sparks that fell. And the exile of Mitzrayim, the Yidden affected the primary aspect and the majority of this service. They elevated 202 out of the 288. So the Rebbe says something, it's surprising at least. Since that is the case, if Hashem would have delayed and kept the Jewish people in the exile of Mitzrayim for some further duration of time, the Rebbe says we would have elevated and we would have completed the refinement of all the 288 sparks of the world of Toyu. Through this would have been fulfilled and completed the goal and the purpose of the creation. V'afal became still in all, even though Hashem's purpose for the entire creation would have become fulfilled if the Yidden would have stayed in Mitzrayim just some set longer amount of time. As soon as the end came about, Hashem did not delay them even the amount of an eye blink. Corresponding to the will of the Jewish people, Shetanu, that they claimed and said, that they will forego the promise that Avraham Avinu was promised, that afterwards, after being enslaved, they will leave Mitzrayim with great wealth. And Chassidus explains the great wealth is not limited to the physical wealth, but it's primarily a spiritual gain. We're talking about the wealth of refining of the sparks of Kedusha, and they're willing to forego that. Since they want themselves to leave Golos. Halavai, we should go out. Forget about the great wealth of sparks. Take it from me out immediately. Daloi Golos, no more Golos. And the truth, they actually affected this. That Hashem did not delay them even the amount of an eye blink. So that's one thing we see about the Geulah from Mitzrayim, that was immediately when the time came. We didn't wait for any sparks to be elevated. Another thing we see by Geulah Mitzrayim, Vav, and concerning the manner of the redemption, Hageulah Mitzrayim hoisa Geulah bepoil v'pashtus. The redemption from Mitzrayim was a Geulah in actuality and in the simple sense. It's not just they were redeemed in their spiritual state. They left the 49 gates of Tumah, for example, or they elevated into 49 levels of Kedusha, etc. No. We're talking about an actual Ki'im Geulah Kipshuta Mamish, a literal redemption to Kol Bnei Yisrael Yotzim Et Mitzrayim. The entire Jewish people left the land of Mitzrayim Kedei Leleches Lekabos HaTorah, to go and receive the Torah. Like it says that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, when you take the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim, they will serve Hashem on this mountain, the mountain of Chodesh, Har Sinai, where Hashem appeared to Moshe Rabbeinu in the burning bush. In addition to the fact that the Chazal say that the fact that they were in the future received the Torah, that was in that merit, they were able to lotzis Mitzrayim, to go out of Mitzrayim. In addition to that was the merit by which they went out, that was also the purpose. The goal and the purpose of going out of Mitzrayim is like Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu then, to receive the Torah. We take from Miyad, and immediately after receiving the Torah, Likonis Eretz Yisrael would have been the time to enter Eretz Yisrael. Like it says, I will take you out from under the burdens of Egypt, etc. And I'll bring you to the land. It's one continuum. Yitzias Mitzrayim, Matan Torah, and Eretz Yisrael, which should have taken place one after the other. And the point of this idea that we're just now saying, even before the Jewish people went out of Mitzrayim, they were already in an elevated state. Va'afal became, despite being in an elevated state, there was a need in the literal Geulah. What was this elevated state that we're referring to? 2 lines on the bottom of the page. Concerning the enslavement in Mitzrayim. So we learned though they went out of Mitzrayim in Nisan, already a half a year earlier, on Rosh Hashanah, any of the enslavement and servitude stopped. Not only that, afterwards, after that half a year, in that last half a year that the Eden spent in Mitzrayim, was added even more so through the breaking down of Egypt, through the plagues, etc. Until the warning that was given to the Egyptians about the plague of the firstborn. In addition to the very breaking down of Egypt and their pridefulness, by warning them and threatening them with this most difficult of all the 10 makis, It was a special break and threat and putting down of Pari, the king of Mitzrayim. She'amar loy Moshe, that Moshe Rabbeinu told Pari before Makas B'choros, v'yordu kol avedecha eila elai v'ishtachvu, that all of these servants that standing here before you will come to me and they will bow down to me. Koilol Pari ba'atzmai. That it was including Pari himself, but Moshe, out of respect, he didn't say it explicitly, but hint, hint, wink, wink. Pari understood, and Moshe understood what they were talking about. These words were something that Pari, the king of Mitzrayim, heard, gehert und derhert, which means not only did he hear, he also appreciated what Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to say. He realized what was being said. He didn't just hear it in the ear, he took it in. Which means that it really affected a breaking down of what Pari was about. Of course, it wasn't total because he didn't let him go through, but it affected a certain breakage of the clip of Mitzrayim and the toughness of Mitzrayim and so on. Second paragraph, since that was the case, the Jewish people could have continued remaining in Mitzrayim, Be'eretz Goshen. They would have lived in the land of Goshen, in a state of freedom from enslavement from Egypt. Why leave Egypt? They are now on the top of the world. They are now no more enslaved. The Egyptians are scared of them. So they could go on living in the land of Goshen, beautiful suburb, beautiful place, without any difficulties. Why leave? And Pari would have agreed to this. The whole argument back and forth in Pari and Moshe was leaving Mitzrayim. But to stay in the land of Goshen, Pari wouldn't have resisted. Even after the servitude ceased from our forefathers, like we said, a half a year before on Tishrei, and therefore any benefit that Pari would have had from the Jews, from their slavery, also ceased. Still in all, Pari did not agree to let them go free. So the question is, why wouldn't he let them go free? Beforehand, he had a whole slave population who would support Mitzrayim, would help Mitzrayim. But if a half a year, he wasn't getting anything out of them, and you're saying they could have stayed that way forever, so what benefit would he have had of holding them back? He says, the simple reason for it, why Pari would want to have the Jews stay there, even though he couldn't enslave them, because he saw all the miracles and all the makas that took place. By knowing he knew that from Yaakov's bracha to Pari, when he first came down to Egypt 210 years earlier, Pari used to come to the Nile River, and the Nile River would rise towards Pari and therefore irrigate the land of Egypt, which needed the water of the Nile to irrigate it. Meaning, Hainu Pari knew Shashpos Hamazon L'chol Eretz Mitzrayim Ba'omer B'chos Shel Yaakov. The sustenance, food that came to the entire land of Mitzrayim came from the bracha of Yaakov. Even from this he understood the very fact that the Jewish people are settled in his land affects a drawing down of bracha to the land of Mitzrayim until a way that his whole entire rule was in a powerful way, that he was a superpower. As we know that the Yidden were only in Geulah by great nations. It's inappropriate, the Chazal say, for Hashem's children to be enslaved by some minor players. So any nation that the Jewish people were ever in exile by was a superpower. But if the Jewish people would have left, all of his brachas would have gone down, being a superpower would have gone down, etc. Umekiven Shekain, since he realized what the Jewish people brought to the table by just being there, even if they weren't enslaved, he would have agreed to any condition. As long as the Jewish people are staying in his land, he would have agreed, let them sit in the land of Goshen, let them learn Torah, let them do whatever they want. I won't enslave them, because he realized the great benefit of the very fact that the Jews were there. So things could have just gone on without the Yidden leaving. Vayakhel-Pekudei still on all the Rebbe says, there had to be the redemption from Mitzrayim in the literal sense. Not just freedom from the enslavement of Mitzrayim. It wasn't just enough to have freedom while living in Mitzrayim. We had to physically leave the land of Mitzrayim. And the Rebbe adds Noizayin, to this. Noise of Lebitl Shibit Mitzrayim, beginning to the nullifying of the enslaving of Mitzrayim that began already Rosh Hashanah half a year earlier. Nitoisef Ilu Yachigodles when Yisrael B'Reish Chodesh Nisan was added the greatest quality and advantage by the Yidden at the first day of the month of Nisan, because that was the time Shenamro Lahem Parshas Hachodesh. The whole Parsha, the Torah portion that we read yesterday from the extra Sefer Torah, the Parsha of Hachodesh Hazel Lochem Rosh Chodashim Gomer, this month for you is the head of month, which is Mitzvah Rishayna Shenitztavu Yisrael. They had this unbelievable thing happen to them in Mitzrayim. The first mitzvah in the entire Torah was given to them while they were in Mitzrayim. So what can be greater? They're in Mitzrayim, they're already receiving mitzvahs. And this first mitzvah is so important, ad kedei kach, to such a degree, this is so powerful that there was even a possibility, there was a reason to think that the Torah shouldn't even have begun from Chumash Bereshis, from Parshas Bereshis. It should have begun immediately with this pasuk, Hachodesh Hazel She mitzvah Rishayna Shenitzavu Yisrael. It's the first mitzvah the Jewish people were commanded. There was the beginning of the whole idea of Torah. Began while they were there in Egypt. So they have physical freedom, and they have the spiritual levels of receiving the Torah, receiving a mitzvah from the Torah. And the Rebbe says in the brackets, "Ve'inyan zeh moving b'pashas chol echad v'achas." This is understood simply to every man and woman, lemigod v'ad cotton, from the greatest to the most minor. Shari Rashi koisus b'pashas b'pirush al Torah l'berchom shon mikra. Rashi writes this in a simple sense in his commentary on the Torah to a 5-year-old that learns Chumash, that the Torah should have begun with Hachodesh Hazel. Ve'etzel Yalda, the Rebbe says, by a girl, I'd lifnei gil chamish. I remember learning this before with a different sikha with the Olam, and I don't remember if it was in this sikha or in a different sikha. That by a girl, she learns this even before 5 years old. A boy has to wait till 5 years old to learn this Rashi. A girl learns this even before 5 years old, because greater understanding was given to women than men. So the Rebbe says, maybe that only has to do with like Bas Mitzvah and Bar Mitzvah, that Bas Mitzvah is a 12-year-old and a Bar Mitzvah is a 13-year-old. So the Rebbe says, it's not a sudden thing. All of a sudden she turns 12, then she gets smarter than a boy? No. Doesn't mean that when she turns 12 years old, then all of a sudden she's more mature, she's more intellectual than a boy, and that's why she has a bas mitzvah a year earlier. It's the opposite way around, but just the opposite. Since extra understanding is given a woman, also while being a small girl, therefore, by the time, when she reaches 12 years old, that's why she's obligated in mitzvahs a year earlier. So the Rebbe is saying that a girl learned about Hachodesh Hazel a year earlier, not at least a year earlier, whatever, as something like earlier than a boy, and she appreciates the gewalt of that Yidden were Mitzrayim, they received this first mitzvah. There's no need to add explanation to this. When we tell a small boy or a young girl that the Chodesh Elochem is the first mitzvah that the Jewish people were commanded, Ein Soidach, there's no need La Hoisif Me'uma Levayer Geulah Maila the mitzvah to add and to explain anything about the great advantage of this mitzvah that Shabbat Yitzhak Lahaskal HaTorah. It's the mitzvah with which the whole entire Torah was supposed to begin. So it's such an amazing, fantastic thing. You have the first mitzvah. That's fantastic. So they have everything. They have spiritual, they have physical. Since that's the case, not only could the Jewish people remain in Mitzrayim in a state of freedom from enslavement, they would also be in a state where they have the beginning of the advantage of Torah. Mitzvah Yisrael, the first mitzvah that the Jewish people were commanded, after going through the complete refinement and purification process of bringing in the iron furnace, which Yetzias Mitzrayim is likened to. Yet, despite that being a possibility, third paragraph on the top, Va'afal became still in all, Nigalu v'yotzum and Mitzrayim legamri, they were redeemed and went out of Egypt totally. Geulah and Mitzrayim b'poel mamish, a redemption from Mitzrayim, literally, physically. V'tama dover, what's the reason that they went out of Mitzrayim in such a manner? Mekivim shoyitzrichim l'kabel sa'Torah, since they had to receive the Torah. V'tziachas am Mitzrayim taben selakim alor hazeh. When you will take the Yidden out of Mitzrayim, so then you will serve Hashem on this mountain. Asher gam hachidush the matan Torah misbate bil sa Torah b'negel l'maisa poel mamish. This is also the uniqueness of matan Torah. Just like we're saying, there had to be the actual leaving from Mitzrayim. That's also the uniqueness of matan Torah, the actual performance of mitzvahs. Because the Torah without the actual performance of mitzvahs existed earlier. Because Avraham Avinu fulfilled the entire Torah before it was given. Avram Zakum v'Yeshiva Yeshiva. Avram was a sage sitting in Yeshiva learning. And so to Yitzchak and Yaakov were also studying Torah. Till the ultimate quality of the service of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Oyavi, Avraham is my beloved, meaning that he served Hashem out of love, including also the great quality that the forefathers are likened to a divine chariot and vehicle that's completely nullified to Hashem's will. Yet, despite that, Matan Torah was so much greater than what Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov did. Al Sheva Matan Torah Nischacha P'ulas HaTorah Ba'olam B'poel Mamish. All the others did not influence and did not impact and was not involving the world in the physical state. Matan Torah came about the effect in the world in actuality. So in a similar vein, just like Matan Torah is about the physical world, so too going out of Mitzrayim had to be a physical leaving, or Behesem Lakach, corresponding to this. Gama Yitziyam Mitzrayim Hachana Matan Torah, also the going out of Mitzrayim, the preparation for Matan Torah, Hutzchra Lias Kipshuta Poel Mamish, had to be simply in actuality. So now the Rebbe says, since we say that what took place in Mitzrayim is a, if you will, a practice run, and similar to it is going to be in the Geulah Hasidah. So these 2 points, that it has to be without delay immediately when the time comes, and it has to be an actual physical sense down here, are to be found in concerning Moshiach's coming. From this is also understood concerning leaving this final exile. Kimeit says, like your days going out of the land of Mitzrayim, I will show you wonders that what will take place with Mashiach's times will be reflecting and similar to what happened when we went out of Mitzrayim. The first thing that we mentioned, Benegel, is Managula, concerning the time of the redemption. So you're telling me that when the Yidden went on Mitzrayim, it was the exact time when they had to leave. So the Rebbe says, our time to leave has already come also. Since all the projected end of times that Chazal said already passed, already finished, surely the redemption has to be immediate. Find that the Hashem does not delay them even on the eye blink. You do like the well-known expression of the Frierdiker Rebbe, la'alter la'gula, immediately to redemption. The meaning of immediate means not tomorrow, but it means immediately. That's concerning the time of the redemption. And also concerning the manner of the redemption. Not just spiritually, but rather the true and complete redemption in the literal sense, in actuality, below 10 handbreadths. Like there's a whole story about there was a projected time of the Ketz in the year Tafresh Ches, that's 1808, and they said that was that was the time that the answer that why didn't the Geulah come? But we had the Geulah because the Likkutei Torah was printed. That's all spiritual. And then afterwards the Rebbeim said, but we need to have it in the physical. And there's the additional storm in this Shabbos, that in it is emphasized even more the idea of the Rosh Chodesh Nisan, Shabbos Mevarchim Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the Shabbos where the Rosh Chodesh Nisan is blessed. Parshas Hachodesh, we read Parshas Hachodesh, Parshas Shavua, and the Parsha of the week Shabbat Medubar Advar Miles Rosh Chodesh Nisan. It speaks about the advantage and the quality of Rosh Chodesh Nisan when the Mishkan first went into operation, like I mentioned before. Rosh Chodesh al Geulah, it's the head of the month of Geulah. So the Rebbe says, and the Rebbe is like posing the famous question like he asks many times. Concerning all the above, Misereres Shaila, the question arises, what is the use of talking about all this? We already spoke about this many times. One Farbrengen after another Farbrengen, did not move whatsoever to such a degree it didn't touch, what it didn't affect. We speak non-stop about the Geulah, like it's open in the written Torah and the oral Torah, like the Rambam says, all the Svarim of Tanakh are filled with this topic. And we emphasize that I've been saying about himself, I'm always emphasizing that all the projected ends of Golos already was finished and already passed, until the final end that was revealed through my father-in-law. It's well-known proclamation that immediately to redemption, and for no benefit. So let's skip over to the middle of the page, 4 paragraphs on the bottom of the page. Actually 3 paragraphs on the bottom of the page. And the response to this about what's the benefit of talking about it all the time, according to the ruling of the Rambam. Through fulfilling one mitzvah, he tilts himself and the entire world he tilts the scale to the side of merit. He causes to him and to them, the entire world, a saving and salvation. And therefore the Rebbe says it makes sense. This very speaking, the Rebbe says, I'm speaking about it the whole time. That very speech, that additional one time I'm going to talk about it, will be the thing that will tilt the scale. So the Rebbe adds to this second paragraph from the bottom, and also this, and primarily the main thing, by prefacing. If if we're just saying because it's a good thing, we're going to bring the Geulah. The very speaking about it will be the one mitzvah that will bring about the redemption. It could be enough, only thought. I don't have to talk about it every time. Also, a good thought is a mitzvah, just like when you speak something good. So therefore, what is the purpose? Why am I speaking about it? If I'm just trying to affect it with doing a mitzvah, I can do it with thought. So the Rebbe says, Shema kula hai ve'ulai, perhaps all of my talking about it, yifalu hadvarim al mishum ha'shoimim, the what I'm talking about will affect on somebody of the listeners, they'll begin to do something, and he'll inspire others, etc. Let's skip over to Ois Yud, paragraph after the next paragraph. From speaking about the redemption, befrat beis rotzen, especially during an auspicious time, that in this time, this Shabbos, is emphasized the idea of the month, the head of the month of Geulah. Nis could take from a yad la maisa Geulah poel mamish, which should immediately merit the action of the Geulah in actuality. Like we said before, take from a yad immediately, even before the head of the month of Nisan, in the very day of Shabbos itself. And especially that on Shabbos all your work has to be done. It should be considered like all the actions and service that affects the redemption. All this work should also be done. Therefore, automatically, so therefore, when Rosh Chodesh Nisan of Tavshim Mem Zayin will come about, it'll be the head of month of Geulah, Ad LaGeulah B'ofen Shel Nisan Nisan, until a redemption, a way of miracles, that the word Nisan has two letters, Nun, a Nun at the beginning and Nun at the end, and the Chazal say that someone sees the month of Nisan in a dream, it's a sign that miracles of miracles will occur to him because of the two letters Nun that are in there. Not only that, the very first day of the month of Nisan will be established in a way that the great Bezdin, the great Sanhedrin in Shalayim, will establish it by sanctifying the new moon through the testimony of witnesses, as it was in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. After the Bezdin Haggadol will establish when the month of Nisan is, Yaschilu Achonos Lakrovus HaPesach Yudal Nisan will begin the preparations for offering the Pesach Korban on the 14th of Nisan in Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi, in the third Beis Hamikdash, Yerushalayim Hachodesh, in the holy city of Yerushalayim, Bahar Hachodesh, in the holy mountain, Bartzein Hachodesh, in our holy land. Kainti Alonu Apoel Mamish, so it should be for us in actuality. Lamatam Asarat Fochim, below 10 handbreadths, but Pashtus Mamish, literally, simply so.